You're finally at that hot new spot, the one your friends keep raving about, sitting across from your date. It's going...
Another round?
Really well. And that dish you've been dying to try, oh, it's headed your way. You can smell it, hear it sizzling fresh off that skillet as it comes closer, and served. Go ahead, enjoy. After your phone sneaks a bite first. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.
Football fans, grab your favorite food and a cooler full of drinks. It's time to tailgate. Whether you're serving up hot dogs and hamburgers or breaking out the barbecue, feel free to kick things up a notch with Frank's Red Hot. And when you're looking to cool it down, reach for a nice cold Bud Light. The team's going all the way this year. Make sure you're there to cheer them on. And don't forget to fire it up with Frank's Red Hot and cool it down with Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Bud Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason. Today I'm super excited to talk because we're talking to Paul Wilson. I met Paul back in April when we were taking Journey to 100, the documentary we made at Athletic Brewing, taking that across the country. And Paul was photographing one of the events, and we got to talking. He's a friend of Jason Hardrat, the subject of Journey to 100, and just heard about his story. We went out for dinner afterwards and just got to listen to what he's doing, what he's into, and it was awesome. And I was immediately like, you've got to be on the podcast because this is amazing. Some of the highlights of what he does, because he does a lot of things. He's a professional photographer, chief storyteller at Rios to Rivers, lead ambassador for the Northwest River Supplies, and a really good whitewater kayaker. In fact, right after this conversation we had, he was getting ready to leave on like a month-long kayaking trip where he was training a bunch of kids to do this epic adventure in a couple years. They're just getting kids ready right now. So I honestly want to hear how that went and would love to have him back on. But Paul grew up in Oregon and is Native American, and so his people have been there a very long time near the Klamath River, and they have unfortunately seen the damming of the river over generations and some of the devastating effects that has had on the river and the ecosystem. And so what's really cool is that Paul and his crew are using whitewater kayaking as a way to advocate to have the river restored back to its natural state. So what they're going to do is they're going to remove all the dams along the river, and it is happening very soon, and they're going to make a documentary about kayaking, descending it for the first time without dams, which is going to be awesome, and they're going to bring all these kids to do it. So that's just part of his story, but we're going to talk a lot about that and a lot about how he got into the sport, because there's a very unique story there, too, that involves going down to Patagonia, which is an epic way to get into any adventure sport. So it was a pleasure having Paul on. I encourage you to follow him. Instagram, he posts amazing pictures, Rios to River. You can find out more about him in the show notes. There's a lot of links. But anyway, thanks, Paul, for being on, and look forward to talking to you soon. Let's go ahead and jump in. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today we are talking to someone I'm really stoked to talk to, Paul Wilson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hey man, it was an adventure getting here. This is I forgot an SD card, and you had traffic stuff, and here we are talking though. So where are you coming from today?
I'm here in Southern Oregon. I'm at the Gaucho Collective in Klamath Falls.
Now, I see. I know this. I always ask this first. It's like, where's home for you and where you're from? But you're from Klamath Falls area originally too. Well, right?
Yeah. So my family's been here in the Klamath Basin. I'm native, so I'm Klamath and Modoc tribes. So my peoples have been here for a little over 14,000 years, and I live in a little town on the Wood River in a town called Fort Klamath.
A true native of that area, not someone like me. You've been in 14,000 years, so that's an estimation of how far it goes back. That's crazy.
Yeah, those are our oldest shoes. So however long it takes you to learn how to make shoes in a place, that's our oldest developed technologies.
Oh my gosh. That is wild.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I know you do a lot of different things, but I want to know, growing up where you did and how you did, were you encouraged to pursue any sort of adventure sports? And that could be just outdoor skills or anything at all. Was that just part of life growing up, or was that something you had to discover later?
I think the formal setting of like adventure sports was something kind of relatively new to me. But growing up, my dad had us, my parents kind of had us in, typical sports, lacrosse, basketball, soccer, those kinds of things. But my dad is a real outdoorsman. He's always been connected to the land. He can live subsistently, summer, winter, in some pretty harsh conditions. He can get his own food, develop structures, and take care of himself. And so he always taught us those things. And I didn't realize how intimate that relationship was just because it was normal to us coming up and snowshoeing out into, these creeks and rivers in the middle of the winter. We're hunters and fishers. And so, being able to spend a good amount of time self-sufficiently crossing land has always been a part of not regular life, but pretty consistent throughout the year. So that has been a really cool way for me as I'm kind of dipping my toes into the adventure sports world to feel comfortable, to feel at home in these really backcountry type settings on expeditions. I feel so happy and wonderful out there.
Man, that is too cool. Your dad sounds awesome. That's awesome.
He is. He really is.
Are y'all still pretty close?
Yeah. He just got his knees redone. Both knees were replaced. So for the last 30 years, his knees have been bone on bone. And still, it was really hard to slow him down at all. And he's back up and running with some bionic knees now. And so it's been really cool to see him, at the beginning of the year, just down and out. And he's already back and spending time out in the woods on his own. And I'm excited to try to get him out into the mountains later on this year.
Better watch out. Daddy's got new knees.
It's dangerous.
That is awesome, man. A mix of the old and the new, outdoor survival skills and Terminator knees. You need both. It's a balance.
Right.
That is awesome. So, I want to kind of hear, the outdoor survival stuff, or just kind of the subsistence is so interesting. But I know that you're huge into kayaking now, and I'm pretty sure there's a story there of how you got involved, because it involved you and your sister, and I heard a little bit about it when we met in Oregon, but I want to hear the full story if you can.
Yeah, totally. So my introduction to paddle sports through whitewater, outdoor rec type kayaking and rafting, because my people are canoe people. So we've always kind of been around the lakes and rivers. In 2017, my little sister, in the middle of summer, she was asking my parents and asking myself and my other siblings, can I apply for this program? She had heard through the grapevine. We live in a, Chiloquin, Southern Oregon, really rural community. Not too many big opportunities come by all the time. And she had heard about this program where people were going to raft the Klamath River. And it sounded kind of extreme. She wasn't old enough to actually participate in the program. And I think my mom she didn't want to be the bad parent, tell her no, because I think we were all a little scared of that type of thing. But she didn't meet the age requirement. So my mom was like, yeah, definitely apply to that. And instead of being told no, she was a perfect fit for the program. And the next day she was packing her bags and was off on a couple-week adventure on the Klamath River with these people. We had no clue who they were. Dropped her off in the parking lot of Macy's or something to this lady in a white van. And
that's how most adventures start.
To see you. Right. And we were we hope we see you again. And we did. And she had an amazing time. And it was with this group, this nonprofit organization called Rios to Rivers. And what Rios does is they do river running exchange programs with river-based youth from around the world. And they basically take kids from either impacted or endangered rivers by dams, and they do source to sea expeditions. And so my little sister, we've always been involved in stewardship, and that's what the whole programming is about, is taking care of the rivers where we all recreate. And she had this fantastic time. And fast forward like a year later, the second part of the program, the way that Rios does their work is they brought kids from Chile, from this river down in Chile where dams were supposed to go in. They brought those kids up and showed them the Klamath River. So that was what my little sister was on, was these kids. She got to kind of host these kids and show them this river that she belongs to and talk about the relationships that we have with that river. And our river, we have 4 pretty large scale dams on it for hydroelectric dams. And she got to tell those kids, we don't get salmon in the upper part of the basin anymore. That's been removed from our diets because the dams don't have fish ladders. So, that's how we kind of understand this river. It still provides for us, but just not the way that it once did. And a year later, the second part of that program was taking youth from the Klamath Basin down to Chilean Patagonia to the Rio Baker, the Baker River. There was this alternate space. We had been fundraising. My little sister had been fundraising to earn her way onto that trip and pay for her way there. And we had successfully done that. But this alternate space opened, and she was like, you have to apply. You have to go with me. And so thank goodness this other kid had lost their passport. We rush ordered my passport. And before I knew it, I was down in Chilean Patagonia with my little sister on my first river trip.
Wow.
Which is an amazing introduction to paddle sports. Was on one of the world's premier places for whitewater, and that was the first time going. And so I went from this river where we get annual notices on the Klamath here in Southern Oregon or California that like the water is toxic. The water behind dams in those reservoirs turns green with toxic algae because water is sitting. And it's really bad for the environment. But there, I started counting on the first day, and then I got past like 45 of these glaciers up above us, and seeing the glacier and then this Slot Canyon waterfall system coming right into the river. One of those is really cool when you're in Southern Oregon or the gorge, up near Portland. But when you count 45 of those in a day, and you just kind of lose count of how many of those you're seeing, and you can dip your water, your canteen and drink straight out of the river for 3 weeks. We were down there for 3 weeks. That was life-changing for me. And the whitewater, having that such a huge river like that to introduce me to the sport. I started and I just haven't turned back since. It's such a beautiful thing.
3 weeks in Patagonia as your introduction to adventure is, I don't think I've heard of anyone else's intro being that epic. That is some serious, that's a bucket list for anybody, 3 weeks down there. Holy crap. So for you though, your mind was already turning to, this is different than home in the sense that there's no dams or it's not having these same issues that home is having. So it's almost like adventure was coupled from the beginning with you for advocacy for making the outdoors better. Tell me if I'm wrong, or maybe you've put that together after the fact, but it sounds like it was right there at the beginning.
Yeah, it was right there for me. And I was enrolled in college. And so during these night times, we're self-supported on this. So in a river trip, in a river expedition like that, we've got a number of big rafts that are, 14, 16 feet long, and we're carrying everything in. Chilean Patagonia is as backcountry as you can kind of get. It's one of those places where you're out there. And so we've got all of our food, we've got everything with us. And that's where I felt super comfortable. That felt natural to me in the way that, my dad has kind of brought us up of, you're able to take care of yourself. You take in what you have and you leave the place better than you found it. It's not for us, for Indigenous peoples. I know that for like the sport, the outdoor rec space as a whole, leave no traces is a great standard. But for like Indigenous peoples, we've had such rich histories of finding balance in our stewardship, in our taking up space and moving through lands, that leave no traces is kind of ludicrous for us. Like we aim to find that balance of our civilization, our society, and our relationship with these lands and waters through like natural contracts, through like, okay, I understand that I can't overtake, overfish, overuse, overtravel these places because I owe that place a debt because it's providing for me. It's providing me sustenance. It's providing me a beautiful place to be. And so being down in Chilean Patagonia, for 3 weeks with the youth from there, having those people come and host us and have pride and showing, we're all from these small rural communities and, we might not have the best economies, but we're in some of the most beautiful places in the world. And so to be able to go and celebrate, they had beaten the campaign to put dams on the river through community action. And so it was such a deeply rooted thing for me because they won. They had won. They had saved their river from development, from this extractive economy where otherwise that river would not run the same. You'd lose rapids, communities would get flooded out. And so on a nightly basis, when we're setting up camp, I was still in college. And so I was doing like calculus proofs in the middle of the night after some pretty long days on the river. I'd set up my headlamp in the top of the tent and do some calculus proofs. Then I came home after the trip and aced my finals. But I was so tied to this, and this is where I wanted, I think, my post-secondary ed to take me towards, was this intersection of like land and water, play and usage, and building solidarity in networks and environmental stewardship, that I ended up dropping out. And I've been sticking with, I've been working with Rios ever since 2018. And so to answer your question, like that's how deeply that kind of resonated with me. It's kind of become my life, using those intersections that are super effective.
What was it about paddling specifically that got you wrapped you up so much? You know what I'm saying? Was it because of that introduction in Patagonia? Could it have been cycling or something else? Or is there something, I know you were talking about the history of paddling and being canoe people. Do you think that's what it was? Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. I know a lot of the people listening to this show are doing their part to help fight climate change and not leave such a big carbon footprint on the earth. Well, I'm going to give you a new tool to add to your arsenal, and that is the Aspiration Zero credit card. How it works is every time you use it, they plant 2 trees. So literally every time you swipe your card, they plant 2 trees, which is about how much carbon dioxide is used every day or produced every day by the average American, is about how much 2 trees can absorb. So what's really cool is you can rest assured every time you use it, they're planting 2 trees. And to date, they've already planted 75 million trees. So if you want to make your dollars make a difference, apply for the Aspiration Zero credit card today and earn a $300 bonus after spending $3,000 in the first 90 days. Apply now at aspiration.com/ASP to go carbon neutral effortlessly and earn a $300 bonus. Go to aspiration.com/ASP. The Aspiration Zero MasterCard is issued by Beneficial State Bank pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Good credit required. Terms and conditions apply.
Football fans, grab your favorite food and a cooler full of drinks. It's time to tailgate. Whether you're serving up hot dogs and hamburgers or breaking out the barbecue, feel free to kick things up a notch with Frank's Red Hot. And when you're looking to cool it down, reach for a nice cold Bud Light. The team's going all the way this year. Make sure you're there to cheer them on. And don't forget to fire it up with Frank's Red Hot and cool it down with Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Bud Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
I think so. There's something about being on this river. They're like super highways. And the way in which you can kind of maneuver through a landscape on a river, I mean, on foot, doing through hikes is amazing, but it doesn't have that as intimate of a relationship for me as water has had. And so being able, and the adrenaline of it, even if you're doing super crazy mountain traverses and running them like some of these elite athletes, it's this really, really unsafe way wherein there's huge hazards with whitewater paddling, but the way in which the river kind of lets you go through it and has these really fun opportunities to play as you're traveling through it using these vehicles, I haven't really seen another sport akin to it. And being a lake and a river person, it really does speak to the soul, the way that you're able to connect with this place and just how adrenaline wise it is such a beautiful thing, hitting big waves and catching air, flying in this little self-contained unit. There's nothing like it.
Too cool. Oh, I just love it. I love to be on the water, but not the adrenaline as much. I do more paddleboarding slowly, but you are going, and we don't have any rapids here in Florida, so I'm limited. We have waves in the ocean and whatnot, but so describe the Klamath River. Obviously, I know a lot of your advocacy and your work is being done there. Describe this river. You talked about the dams. Tell us about what this place is like and what draws you there.
Oh man, it's home. My family's brought me up around in the tributaries. Really, my little sister and I really hadn't gone past the headwaters of the Klamath for a majority of our life until we started that whitewater stuff. But the Klamath, its headwaters come from throughout Southern Oregon, but one of the most iconic tributaries or aquifers for its headwaters is Crater Lake. And so coming out of this mountain volcano, the volcanic lake, we call it Giwas in our language. We were here before that volcano blew up 7,700 years ago. And so water sits up there, all the snowpack from the winter, and comes through. And I live on one of its aquifers on the Wood River. And so it's this crystalline turquoise blue water that comes out of the ground. It's some of the best tasting water in the world. I'm a little biased, but it is some of the best stuff in the world. And in the upper basin, we have a number of lakes. A bunch of these lakes were actually drained lakes and marshlands, really similar to the kind of waters that you're used to in Florida, with that like marshy, just super nutrient dense kind of place. We don't have crocodiles, but we've got some pretty mean mosquitoes. Right. And all of that, it's a super different type of water than the mid and the lower part of the Klamath. And so we go from this mountain lake type of terrain to the Trinity Alps, some pretty steep stuff, and some pretty steep whitewater as well, some class 4 or 5 sections. Whitewater is classified basically 1 through 5 is runnable, and then past 5+ is stuff that doesn't get ran. And so similar to like a climbing type grade system. But the mid Klamath is this gorgeous canyon, big mountain arena. And then you kind of come towards the mouth of the river. I think it's around 300 miles from like the start to the mouth of the river. I count the tributaries, so I kind of get mixed up on the numbers. But you end up at the redwoods on the coast. And so right where you're coming into the mouth of the river and you meet the ocean, you've got these giant coastal redwoods that welcome you. And it's pretty unreal to be able to travel from Crater Lake all the way to the redwoods on a single river, and to see all of the different cultures that kind of lie on the river. My tribe, the Klamath tribes, we're one of 4 tribes on the river, or one of the 4 federally recognized tribes. Anyways, there's a number of tribes that are not federally recognized, and the different cultures that exist throughout the river are super, evident of the different types of way that the river represents itself with human activity.
Man, can tell you love this place and you love this river and the tributaries to it. What, besides the dams, what were some of the major changes that just development, irrigation brought to the river as you saw? Because, it's crazy to think like we all fall in love with a place the way it is because that's all we've known. But we didn't see the place 100 years ago or 7,000 years ago. And knowing a certain amount has been lost in our lifetime, what has, been some of the biggest changes you've seen and kind of just helped fuel this advocacy for it? Because I've read that it was one of the most productive salmon rivers systems in the whole United States at one time. But that has since not been the case. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think the 3 biggest impacts on the river are water quality, water quantity, and dams. And so, like I was telling you, a lot of these bigger impacts formally started around 1905. And so just a little over 100 years ago. And that started with lakes and marshes being drained for agricultural land. And so Southern Oregon is super like high desert type area. And so Bend is like people are pretty familiar with Bend. We're pretty similar to Bend in the way that the terrain looks here in Southern Oregon around the headwaters of the Klamath. And so these lakes and marshes were super critical in terms of being able to water storage throughout the year, as well as dealing with nutrient loads. And so when those were drained, we lost something like 90% of our marshlands here. And so imagine what that would do to Florida if you lost 90% of your marshlands, that really critical Everglades, which you guys are dealing with stuff there. But that's what happened for us.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Losing all of that and turning it into this monocrop agricultural land that has started to use water in an unregulated, unmonitored type of fashion. And the agricultural runoff from cows, from pesticides, all of those things are feeding into a system that no longer has a filter. Those natural filters of the lakes and the marshes no longer exist in the upper basin because 90% of it's gone. And so we put in the dams shortly after 1905, starting in 1905, and we created all of these artificial reservoirs. And so instead of a nice, cold, free-flowing river, we created all of these lakes that never existed before. There were these really healthy, intricate systems of lakes and marshes that could clean and self-regulate and store water naturally. And instead, now we've got all of these reservoirs, zero marshland, zero actual water storage. We've got agricultural runoff and unregulated, unmonitored water usage. And we, the tribes, have to fight, every day to make sure to ask and demand that the United States, the federal government, just does the bare minimum of that nation-to-nation relationship that we have outlined in our treaty, the Treaty of 1864 with the United States. of maintaining this watershed that's critical for our lifeways, but we've held sacred. We have to use the terminology of like natural resource management because, that's what the United States understands and recognizes. And so we've had to change our relationship and translate it so that the United States can understand and enforce these laws that they're really, really not interested in enforcing because of the monies and the political preferences it has for agricultural parties here in the Upper Basin. And so I can't really speak for a lot of the downriver issues, but a lot of those downriver issues kind of stem from the headwaters because of the water quality that they're receiving from that in-stream flow. And I'll just mention, though, we are very, very excited to have the dam removal process in its final stages. And so at the end of 2023 is when dam removal will start. And by the end of 2024, all 4 of those large-scale dams should be removed. We've had this process started before, and the feds have gotten in the way and said, no, you guys aren't ready for this. There's not proper protocols set up. They've come up with a number of different reasons why they wanted to keep these dams. And so finally, both states, California and Oregon, have signed on as liability to hold the liability, and the Klamath River Renewal Corporation was formed. They're fully funded, and so dam removal is happening, and it's happening in my lifetime, which is insane. This is world-changing for me because I've grown up on this river. My dad has brought us up doing creek and river restoration projects. We didn't know that that's what we were doing. We didn't know we were doing these deep ecological things. We thought we were just going and taking care of these streams and creeks because that's where we go and get our water. That's what takes care of the rivers. And so for my dad, the decades of work that he's done and other people like him, my uncles, cousins, all of these people that came before us that have done all of these decades of work, they did it without understanding that they would ever reap the benefits to see a river come back in their lifetimes. And so the idea that my dad could see salmon come back to the Upper Basin within his lifetime is beautiful to me. It's such the dynamic, that baseline thing where that's supposed to be a part of our diet. That's supposed to nurture and give our bodies the fuel to go and run around in these mountains, to go paddle on these rivers. That hasn't existed for us. And for my nephews and nieces, they'll get to live in a world here where they'll never know a reality for them. They'll never know a life way that doesn't include those really critical proteins and fats that nourish them, and being able to pull those salmon out themselves and have that really intimate relationship with the land and water where their people have called that home since time immemorial. And so I've lived in a really, really dark time in terms of ecological status, but I'm also living in one of the most hopeful times that has ever existed in the face of this dystopian status of our rivers and lakes. But in that darkness, I'm really lucky to be in a time and in a place where I get to be a part of the movement towards dam removal, and I get to celebrate that and share that with others.
Wow. I bet it's invigorating. I bet it's just going to be such a big deal. This is so cool. I know you're doing as well, not just working to get this dam removal project across the finish line and kind of helping keep that momentum, but I know you do photography that helps bring awareness to it. I know you are planning a film, and you're actually planning an adventure to kind of celebrate this whole thing. Can you tell us about what that adventure is and when it's going to take place?
Yeah, so originally I had this idea of bringing young representatives, so using Rios rivers. I'm their chief storyteller, by the way, and so I handle all of our communications and help with admin. But I had this idea using the framework. So Rios, we find the youth from these river sheds, and we're really selective with who we're bringing. We want these students, these participants in our expeditions to be people that are, kind of taking care of rivers. Our tagline is inspiring the next generation of river stewards. For 2020, which was the original date for the dam removal, I had this idea of bringing youth from 20 different river basins around the world to come and bear witness. In indigenous ceremonies and protocols, it's really important to have community members from outside of your direct community to come in and experience, to witness that role as a witness, and taking that story home to their communities and sharing that story was our manner of historical reference. That was our recording, and so our stories are really rich in nuance. And so I wanted to bring 20 different river basins in 2020. And every year that they've pushed it back, we just add on another river basin. And so right now we're planning on a 2025 expedition of the freed Klamath. Somebody had told me, instead of calling it a first descent, maybe a re-descent. I'm not a fan, like the colonial nature of a lot of adventure sports in the first descent or the first ascent. It's like tacking your name on there and like you've conquered it. But when you think about like Everest or K2, it's like people are not conquering that mountain. You're lucky to go up there, and you're lucky if that weather window allows you to be up there.
Yeah. I hate that word conquering in the outdoors. I hate it because it is, you are surviving by the grace of Mother Nature herself to come down from something like that. Yeah, we avoid that language at all costs here. So,
yeah. And so figuring that out for us of like, well, if because somebody is going to go down in history for the first to paddle down the Klamath,
post dams. Post dams,
a freed Klamath, in this new recorded history. And so I was telling the story. Basically, there's two different expeditions that are being planned, and that first one is bringing those 25 different river basins. So the White Nile, the Zambezi, the Mekong River, all of these really big, really classic rivers that have been impacted or endangered by rivers. We're selecting youth from those rivers, from the Amazon, from Chilean Patagonia, those rivers where that story is going to go really far, where they're fighting dams right now. That story of our dam removal and getting to come and see dams being removed and a renewed relationship is going to be huge for them. And so that's the one huge expedition I'm really looking forward to. But I was telling the story to a professional kayaker last year. I'm an ambassador for NRS, the Northwest River Suppliers, and we were doing an expedition out on the Snake River out in Idaho, and we stopped by white salmon on the Columbia Gorge, and NRS had brought out this professional kayaker. His name is Rush Sturgis, and Tyler Bratt, and I was telling them this story of, I'm going to bring 25 different river basins around the world, come and experience the first descent, recent of my freed river. And they were super stoked. They asked me, are any Klamath tribal youth going to hardshell it? Are you going to go in a whitewater kayak? And there's really not that many like Klamath tribal kayakers on the river in the different communities. There's virtually none of us. It's a really hard sport to get into. A lot of outdoor rec sports, these extreme sports, there's a very tall barrier of entry, the cost of entry, and then the education and infrastructure that has to exist to allow these sports to happen is huge. And so I couldn't name any other kayakers outside of, and I'm a beginning kayaker. I'm still kind of getting my place in the sport. But that conversation with them while we were paddling with my youth on the white salmon inspired this program called Paddle Tribal Waters. And so this July, in about a week, we start, and we're going to train up 16 Klamath tribal youth from throughout the Klamath Basin. All of the federally recognized tribes are represented. and we're kitting them out. So Jackson Kayak, NRS, all Werner paddles, they're all helping us. We've done a lot of fundraising to make this program happen, cost free for our kids, and they're gonna go away from our program knowing how to paddle. Doing all the introductory paddle skills. They're gonna go home with wilderness first aid and swiftwater rescue certifications. And we're just so excited because the idea is to train these kids up. They're going to be the ones to do that first descent. And we want to center them because they can kind of teach the outdoor rec community. They can manufacture this. When the Klamath is freed, there's going to be a huge push for a whitewater space, a whitewater community on the river bigger than it is right now. And they can use their teachings from their communities to kind of steer that space, our paddling community, towards a more sustainable, a more stewardship driven type of manner. And so I want them to really define what responsible recreation, what a good land and water use looks like for the Klamath Basin, because I can't do it alone. I can't speak for those lower tribes. And older people, it's even further for them to be able to understand what a young person, what a young tribal member that is involved in the whitewater, that is involved in outdoor rec on the river is going to see as the responsible way to make sure that they're aligning this sport and recreation can be very extractive. My buddies over at Natives Outdoors, they've got an awesome film on looking at how outdoor recreation can kind of be extractive, and you're going and you're taking from a place this experience. But how are you giving back? How are you maintaining that trade relationship with these places? And I really want to use that ideal of these tribal kids can show what outdoor rec looks like while aligning that with these traditional ecological knowledge systems that we have ingrained in our identities for the future, and really show what a deep relationship with a natural place looks like. And so I'm so excited because I'm just getting to be a part and getting to witness and play my role in this. But yeah, that's the second part of this huge expedition that we're planning, and we've got a film. Russ Sturgis is gonna help make that film. We're co-directing that film, and just super stoked to be on this ride with these kids.
And that's coming up this month or next month.
This month, in about a week, we're starting. It'll be on the Cal salmon, so the California salmon and the Klamath River. We're doing it at this really legendary place called Otter Bar. It's a kayaking lodge that has existed for like 40 plus years. It's super luxurious. The kids are going to be, so well taken care of. We've got a cook helping us from Otter Bar, fully kitted out. I'm so stoked for this to happen and to see where these kids take their paddling careers after this, because the stoke, the inspiration, their dedication is unreal.
Wow. And this is not necessarily the film about the dam removal.
This will roll into the dam removal one. So this first,
because no dams have been removed yet.
Not yet, not off the Klamath. So these big four are going to happen starting. The dam removals are starting late in 2023 and early in 2024. And so the latest or the earliest that we could run it is late 2024. But water is going to be bad. So think of it as like a bad time of year for like skiing or something. Like it's not going to be good to go. And so spring 2025 is when we'll have everybody going down and really having that party on the river. But this short film, we'll have a short film come out either late this year or early next year, showing this experience, this first cohort of kids learning how to kayak on the Klamath.
Wow, that is awesome. You're doing so much. You're connecting your history and your heritage and your people back to what it's supposed to be. You're connecting children with the world of adventure sports and the world of conservation and stewardship. you're doing the actual work of stewardship and conservation itself. There's a lot going on here, and I'm sure you are just absolutely stoked. And I know I got to go in just a couple minutes, but what we should do, I know this is going to be a multi-stage project, getting these dams out and creating that re-first descent or that post-dam first descent down the river. Absolutely epic story. And please keep us posted with Athletic Brewing and here on the show. I definitely want to feature this and talk it up whenever we get the chance, because this is so unique of an intersection between putting adventure sports to good use beyond just your personal growth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love it.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover, all for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter code CONFIDENCE at checkout. That's harrys.com, code CONFIDENCE. Enjoy!
Football fans, grab your favorite food and a cooler full of drinks. It's time to tailgate. Whether you're serving up hot dogs and hamburgers or breaking out the barbecue, feel free to kick things up a notch with Frank's Red Hot. And when you're looking to cool it down, reach for a nice cold Bud Light. The team's going all the way this year. Make sure you're there to cheer them on. And don't forget to fire it up with Frank's Red Hot and cool it down with Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Bud Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.